All right. Good morning, Sabah al-Khair, everyone, and welcome to the Gaza Health Initiative Amsterdam Conference, United Knowledge, Resources, and Solidarity. I welcome all our participants online, as well as here in Amsterdam, and I extend a special welcome to Her Highness Princess Dina Mirad of Jordan, who's with us here at the front row. I'll translate the following words by Tamim al-Barghouthi after saying them in Arabic first. وجثة طفلة بممر مشفى لها في العمر 7 أو 8 على برد البلاط بلا سرير وإلا تحت أنقاض المباني. The body of a little girl in a hospital corridor, 7 or 8 years of age, on the cold of the tiles without a bed, or else under the rubble of buildings. The catastrophic tragedy in Gaza continues to unfold with unimaginable human suffering, and today's conference brings together humanitarian organizations, medical professionals, and NGOs This is Dutch. Excellent. They're slightly late. So today's conference brings together humanitarian organizations, medical professionals, and members of civil society, as well as other actors committed to the lives, health, and dignity of the people of Gaza. Our focus will be the immediate interventions required to deliver emergency care, as well as long-term measures to rebuild and reconstruct the health system of Gaza. Naturally, the nature of our conversations will very often revolve around technical aspects of health system support and recovery. Simultaneously, we of course recognize that there also are political, historic, and even emotional dimensions that one must contend with. The conference is hosted jointly by the Gaza Health Initiative, as well as KIT, the Royal Tropical Institute of the Netherlands, and it seeks to bolster global solidarity and support Palestinian knowledge and initiative to benefit the people of Gaza. We look forward to your input and expertise, as well as active participation. We invite you to speak freely. You are speaking on your own behalf, of course, and this is to try and build, as much as we can, a common vision and find a collective course of action. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Ali El Jabri. I'm a TV journalist and presenter and former war reporter with Dutch language newspapers Trouw and De Standaard. It's a privilege to be among you today. After the opening session, we'll have breakout sessions. These will be interrupted by a lunch. We then return to the plenary room slightly after 3 for some concluding panels, and we'll wrap up the day at about 5:30. A quick note on video and photography. Some people have not a white but a yellow badge. This means they wish not to be photographed or videoed. There is a filming and video crew, however. You might feel that they are sometimes putting you in the shot when you have a yellow badge, but they will edit you out in editing. If you don't have a yellow badge, but you would like to have one, then please head to the registration office and let us at the entrance, the registration tables, and ask for one, or speak to B. Pasha, who's here in the room. Could you stand up? She's in the back. If you just turn around. So either B. Pasha or the registration desk. Welcome again. Now let's have the first speaker of the day. She's member of the executive committee of the Gaza Health Initiative. Please welcome Lina Sharid.
Good morning. Assalamu alaikum. And thank you very much for being here, for taking the time to be with us in this very important conference. Let me start by welcoming you all to this third GHI conference. This conference is around knowledge, resources, and solidarity. And before I begin, I would like to thank the KIT Institute Leadership Organizing Committee for all their effort that they've put in making this happen. It was not easy. These organizations that came here today came because they care. So I would like to thank every partner and every person in the room for being here for humanity and for support. Thank you all for being here. And thank you everyone who joined us virtually, who could not be with us in person, but they still care. This is an important mission, and we're all here to make it happen. I'm honored today to be representing the GHI committee. The GHI, which have started as an effort of medical professionals coming together in Amman to think of urgent health needs. It was about the crisis is finishing tomorrow. That was back in February. We all came there and we worked so hard to put a plan together because we're gonna start implementing the rebuild. Fast forward, it's almost a year and we're still suffering and things are not getting better. So if I would like to say one thing, from Amman, where we focused on immediate health needs, to the second conference in Beirut, where we then moved into medical education, because by then, we've lost all the medical universities, we've lost more than 1,000 healthcare workers, and therefore we had to extend from focusing on healthcare into medical education. And at that time, there was big alarms around public health, which you can see today with the polio and with everything else. So we've moved in. Today, we are in this important city. We all love Amsterdam. It's the city of peace, it's the city of resilience, and it's the city that is around rebuild. We're here today to take our health initiative, the platform we created in Gaza Health Initiative for all medical professionals, NGOs, and people who care about the health of Gaza, to take it to global. So thank you again for inviting us here. I would like to close my welcome note with 3 messages. The first one is, if you look at what's happening today, unfortunately, things are not getting better in Gaza. I think we've almost at the point of people in Gaza want to die. They don't want to live. Everything in the healthcare system is destroyed. If you think about it, more than 500 attacks on healthcare facilities over the last year resulted in most of the hospitals are out of service. Only 16 that are partially working, and this partially working 16 will have to serve 2 million population that have been displaced over and over again. And you will hear a lot of what's really happening on the ground with my other speakers. If I look at how things have evolved after that, and if you look at the tragedy, I look at my son who goes to school, and I look at the 650,000 people, children who are in Gaza, unable to go to school for the 2nd year. I mean, it is unfair. It's not only that they don't have schools, they don't have clean water, they don't have food, and now they have different diseases that we have never seen before. So think about the population, think about what's happening. So really, on the ground, things are so bad. My next point is around, is there a hope? And I would like to take a moment to commend the health workers in Gaza. There's 20,000 health workers in Gaza that are still going every day to their work. They still wake up in the morning and they try their best to get where they need with the patients to help. They are, if I look at it, stressed, burned out, probably have no food and no money. Still, they go every day to do their best to support all these patients that they need the most of the help. And in the limited abilities, in the limited medical supply, in the limited facilities that were destroyed. So I would say we all have to learn that there is always hope. What makes them go up and support their patients should make us here have hope to be together, to look at the future, to look at how we solve this, and how do we bring all these organizations that you represent here together for the future, thinking about recovery, thinking about how do we rebuild this health system. This is a complete disaster, and we are not only thinking about one hospital or one facility or one primary clinic. This is public health destroyed, hospitals destroyed, primary care centers destroyed, and if you put it all together with 2 million population that lacked everything for the last year, you know where we're heading, and you know this is something that we need to solve. And my last point here is really around us in this event. This is an event for us to think of different topics. Some of us have passion for making sure there is enough medical supplies. There is a session that will go and focus on this. Please support it. We need safe corridors. We need many more safety areas and safety zones for the people to live, to practice, and for healthcare to take place. Second area is funding, and third area is governance. We don't want, and this is one of our missions in GHI, we don't everyone to help in the same area. We don't want every single healthcare provider or every single NGO to be focused on the same topic. We will bring everyone together to collaborate and to become under one umbrella, and that's really our mission. And I would leave with a very quick note of something that my father used to say in Arabic. This is around طائر العنقاء. Does anyone know the phoenix bird? Phoenix bird is always known for coming out of ashes when they're full of flames. I see Gaza people coming back to life, and when they come back to life, like Phoenix, we would like to be there to help them rebuild their healthcare, rebuild their systems, and we are here, all of us together, hoping to achieve that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lina, and thanks for being aware of the time. Our next speaker heads the advisory board of the Gaza Health Initiative, as well as heading the advisory board of the Palestine Children Relief Fund, among many other key roles in global public health. It's a privilege to invite to the floor Her Royal Highness Princess Dina Merad of Jordan.
Very tricky. That would go viral probably if I fell. صباح الخير جميعاً. Good morning, everyone. Your Excellencies, colleagues, friends, thank you for inviting us to your prestigious institution, one that values equity, human rights, science, and innovation, with one overarching goal, that of advancing progress and harmony for all mankind. We are here to talk about uniting knowledge, resources, and solidarity to discuss ways of how we can all unite to help rebuild the destroyed health system in Gaza. As a global cancer advocate, the last time I spoke about civilians caught in crossfire was in Cambridge, UK in 2022, when I gave a keynote speech on the plight of cancer patients caught in conflict zones. At the time, the all-consuming global topic was the Ukraine war. The Ukraine war was a seminal event for many of us in global health. Of course, firstly, we were all very concerned to see a new war erupt in Europe. And naturally, as fellow human beings, we were very sad and worried, particularly for the ordinary citizens who often bear the brunt of such proxy wars. However, as the war unfolded, we saw something else, a refreshing new way of unprecedented global solidarity. The Security Council, UN agencies, the EU, the human rights and international law organizations all aligned as one, calling for the respect of the Geneva Convention, the non-targeting of civilians, the respect of all international human rights laws. And vis-à-vis health in general, and cancer in particular, we finally saw the start of institutionalizing cancer patient support as part and parcel of the humanitarian system during times of conflict. I remember having conflicted feelings, happy that finally cancer patients are now taken into account during wars. On the other hand, I also felt disappointed, sad, and I must say envious, on why the same standards and solidarity that we saw in the Ukraine did not apply to our people during conflicts in our region, we who suffer the exact same horrors as other civilians. Little did I know then that a year and a half later, in 2023, During the genocide on Gaza, I and many people around the world would be gutted, shocked, and devastated when the whole humanitarian infrastructure, norms, and laws not only were erased, but literally razed to the ground in one blow. Provision of food, water, shelter, hygiene, which are the basic tenets of emergency care during conflicts, were and still are completely denied to a whole civilian population of 2 million people, 70% of which are children. Furthermore, health facilities, health personnel, ambulances, pharmacies, medical storage facilities, whether owned by Palestinians in Gaza or the UN's supposedly protected facilities, were all targeted as collateral damage. Even the Red Cross and the Red Crescent did not escape the onslaught. The Geneva Convention was dead and buried under the rubble as the whole of Gaza. The landscape of healthcare, including cancer care, this is my sort of knowledge about these things, for the 10,000 current cancer patients in Gaza pre-October the 7th was very challenging, to say the least. After all, Gaza's hospitals have suffered from the Israeli blockade for 17 years. Yes, it did not start on October 7th. This blockade severely restricted the movements of goods and people in and out of the Gaza Strip. This meant that all patients had to navigate unique and insurmountable obstacles over and above what an average patient must go through. In the case of cancer patients, for example, one of the most important treatment modalities for cancer care is not allowed and actually denied for Gazan cancer patients, that of radiotherapy. For those who don't know, there was and there is no radiotherapy treatment in Gaza for the past 17 years. Imagine that. Coupled with serious shortages of oncology drugs, equipment, specialized healthcare personnel with 40 to 50% unable to leave for treatment abroad due to severe restrictions, and the requirement of special exit permits to leaving the Strip led many to die from avoidable deaths. And this, of course, trickled down to all the healthcare services in Gaza. So post-October the 7th, instead of calling for replicating and building on the positive steps taken for patients in the Ukraine war, we were now calling for the basic tenets of survival: food, water, fuel for hospitals, and even for the ready and waiting medical and food trucks to enter. Calling for an urgent ceasefire to tend to the wounded. We were reduced to calling for the availability of anesthesia and medical alcohol so that surgeons did not have to disinfect patients with vinegar, nor to amputate children's limbs without it. Yes, the humanitarian system was reduced to calling for basic compassion for the wounded children and civilians, and astoundingly, the calls fell on deaf ears. With destruction of 90% of hospitals, patients in Gaza now did not have any clear navigation routes. If you were one of the lucky few patients sitting on a hospital bed, you knew deep down in your heart that the IV inserted into your veins did not deliver drugs, such as chemo, diabetic, cardiac, or even painkiller drugs. You only had to look at the empathetic glances from your caregivers to know that. You also did not know whether your expert doctor would come in the next day, whether arrested, kidnapped, or killed, or whether your favorite nurse would still be alive, let alone whether your family from yesterday's indiscriminate bombing survived. As for more patients, the dreaded news was when being asked to be displaced from one place to another, knowing full well that there are no safe places in Gaza. As a patient in such circumstances, the mental stress is beyond description. we could never know the scale of their mental stress. I don't think we could never know that. For the children, including the 30,000 plus orphans who witnessed what no child should ever have to witness, would hopefully survive and recover to tell the tale. As for the 10,000 current cancer patients stuck in Gaza, they not only fear the external war, but also fear the internal war still ravaging their body by cancer itself, the latter of which is also a non-believer of ceasefires. So having not many options, countless of patients decided to take the only navigation route available to them. That is to join their extended families, if they still existed, and die slowly and in extreme pain, at least amongst the last vestige of support system. Many would have died by now, probably more from starvation, communicable diseases, shock, and stress than from cancer or any other illness at this point. Forgive me for being very pessimistic and despondent, but it is extremely hard to cling on to any shred of optimism when we see that even the UN, WHO, UNICEF, Save the Children, Doctors Without Borders, human rights, including the so-called mighty International Criminal Court that we all believed in, and other respected organizations whose calls for the application of the Geneva Convention and for the protection of civilians during times of war were and are still completely ignored. I and Professor Richard Sullivan penned an open letter at the start of the Gaza genocide to all cancer organizations in the world, asking them to weigh in and speak up for the implementation of the Geneva Convention for the protection of the safety and health of civilians. I was stunned to see many organizations afraid, struggling and scrambling to write an authoritative, non-political statement in support of protecting the lives of the civilian population, including cancer in times of conflict, let alone a genocide unfolding live before us. We did not ask anyone to weigh in on the politics or on the conflict. No one would be qualified anyway to do so. We just wanted all so-called self-professed global health advocates and medical associations who continuously call for equity, access to care for all human beings, regardless of race, religion, or geography, to simply be slightly outraged at the unprecedented humanitarian catastrophe unfolding before us, and actually weigh in on the humanitarian norms that should be followed during times of conflict, at minimum protesting for the safety of their colleagues, the frontline healthcare workers who were killed just for doing their job. To add insult to injury, we heard about doctors and medical personnel censured by their affiliate medical organizations for supposedly being pro-Palestinian. Asking for the respect of the Geneva Convention, international law, and for the protection of children and civilians' lives is not being pro-Palestinian, but rather being pro-human, pro-civilized. What is at stake here is not just the global failing of protecting Palestinian civilians. It is far more serious than that, and with grave repercussions that will reverberate for all humanity long in the future. The fact that the protection of health for civilians during conflict has been shown to be no longer a sacred right, as sanctioned by international laws, means that in the future, conflict warlords will now take note that they can now weaponize health in times of conflict, as they have seen that they will neither be stopped nor held accountable, taking us all back literally to the barbaric ages. And the problem is that no one now has the right to moralize anything to anybody anymore. As we have seen the tale of two cities unfold right before our very eyes, the Ukraine war was one hopeful example of solidarity and respect of international laws, and the Gaza genocide was the extreme other, replete with double standards, hopelessness, and disregard for human lives. We, as the global community cannot let that happen for all civilians caught in war, not for the Ukrainians, not for the Russians, Israelis, Palestinians, Armenians, Yemenis, Sudanese, Syrians, and any other nation affected by war. Not even for the devil incarnate. That is the whole point of the Geneva Convention, after all. This meeting is called Uniting Knowledge, Resources, and Solidarity. It should be called Breaking the Cancer of Silence. The urgent call for solidarity, solidarity, solidarity. We ask you all to be the first to state that you abhor not only international breaking down of international humanitarian infrastructure during wars, but also reject the interference of power politics, polluting and weakening that framework that was established for exactly such purposes. We need you all to collectively call for real solidarity in order to influence global policy, so that we can all start to rebuild the whole ecosystem of health in Gaza. This should be in tandem with the solid commitment afforded to the rebuilding of Japan after the Second World War. The commitment for Japan included not only a blueprint for rebuilding the infrastructure and the economy, but came with billions of dollars to make that a reality. We know what needs to be done. We need the foundational framework of serious global solidarity to implement what we know quickly and urgently. I hope that today will usher the start of healing and solidarity. Collectively, we simply cannot let the Gaza genocide become the model for defining future humanitarian care and rescue. What happened and still happening in Gaza genocide should never happen again, never to anyone. Thank you very much.
Your Highness, thank you very much for your words. Let's break the cancer of silence. We know what is needed. Our next speaker is President of the Palestinian Medical Relief Society and Palestinian Member of Parliament. Please welcome Dr. Mustafa Barouthi.
Good morning to all of you, and thank you for inviting me to speak to this very important conference. I would like to thank Kate Institute, Gaza Health Initiative, especially Dr. Omar Latouf and Dr. Fawzi Hammouri for your continuous work to make things happen. I would like to thank Her Royal Highness, Princess Dina Mer'ad, for the wonderful speech. You reflected exactly what we think about. And I don't think this conference has to repeat what was already said or done in two previous conferences in Amman and in Beirut. And I don't think we're going to start from zero. But I think we have to conclude today that recovery of the health system in Gaza cannot wait till the end of the war. As a matter of fact, our heroic staff, heroic Palestinian medical and health workers have already started rehabilitating whatever they can rehabilitate. I'm so impressed by our medical relief team in Gaza, in Jabalia camp, who had their center destroyed and then rehabilitated it under the bombardment. I'm so impressed by the people of Shifa Hospital, who rehabilitated the emergency room after the hospital was completely destroyed. These people are really heroes. And I think if there is fairness in this world, the Nobel Peace Prize should go to the health workers of Gaza and for their wonderful work. Another miracle that is taking place today under the bombardment, while people are killed around the clock every day, 50, 60, 70, sometimes 100, is this wonderful vaccination program that is reaching out to hundreds of thousands of children, trying to save them from the terrible disease of poliomyelitis, which we have already eradicated more than 30 years ago. And it came back through what I would call an additional biological warfare that Israel is using against the Palestinian population. We cannot rehabilitate the health sector without stopping this war of genocide. We cannot rehabilitate healthcare without stopping the ongoing atrocities. It's important to remember that Israel has thrown on Gaza 83,000 tons of explosives since the beginning of this war. 50,000 tons came from the United States of America, but many other thousands came from Germany, from other European countries. And it's, just imagine, 36 kilograms of explosives for each child, man and woman in Gaza. It's more than 4 times the explosive power of the 2 nuclear bombs that were thrown on Hiroshima and Nagasaki during the Second World War. And the result is 51,000 people killed, including 10,000 who are still under the rubble that we cannot reach, including 17,000 children. And the most painful fact is that 115 children were born during the war and died during the war. Some of them did not live more than 2 or 3 days. It was so painful to see a father of twins going to register his kids and then bringing their certificate, birth certificate, to find them dead and killed with their mother. But it's not genocide that should be stopped. The other war crime that is happening is the collective punishment, including starving people, including destruction. Yesterday, the Israeli army was destroying Rafah neighborhoods one after the other. Their goal is to erase everything, completely and totally. 1.9 million people are now stuck in a very little strip called Mawasi, which is no more than 20 to 24 square kilometers, or less than 15 square miles. And they are bombarded still. The so-called safe zone is bombarded regularly by the Israeli airstrikes. We cannot rehabilitate the health system without stopping the attacks on the health system itself. Up till now, 885 of my colleagues, doctors, nurses, health professionals, ambulance drivers, were shot and killed by the Israeli bombardment. 34 hospitals out of 36 were destroyed. 80 health centers were completely destroyed. 131 ambulances were destroyed. 162 health institutions, including our organization, Medical Relief, were destroyed. And the total number of people injured and killed in Gaza, this is another shocking figure, is 6.5% of the population of Gaza. Just imagine if that had happened in the United States of America, you would be talking about 21 million people killed or injured in the course of less than a year. This behavior, and I am not ashamed of using this word, cannot be done except by people who are fascists. And that's how they should be called, since they themselves, like the Minister of Finance in Israel, Smotrich, do not shy away from calling themselves fascist homophobes. There are now according to our colleagues, we have, by the way, from my organization, Medical Relief, we have 72 medical teams now working in Gaza, all over Gaza. All of them are Gazans. We didn't need to bring anybody from outside. They are all from Gaza. They work in all parts of Gaza. They treat about 200,000 people every month, and they tell us that 1.7 million people are now suffering from different diseases, including 350,000 who are suffering from chronic diseases that need medical support and need medications regularly. 76, this was also very shocking to me as a medical doctor. 76,000 patients already suffer from infectious hepatitis. And it continues to spread because there is no clean water. According to our medical teams, every person in Gaza, including our doctors and nurses, gets sick 3 times a month. Sometimes from respiratory infections, sometimes from bad water with gastroenteric infections, sometimes from the terrible skin diseases that are spreading everywhere and affecting especially children. And the big question is, as Her Royal Highness has said, where are the human rights? Where are the laws of the world, the international law, the international humanitarian law? Why Israel is above the law, whatever it does? And why Palestinians are prohibited from the same right that every or most Western leaders keep speaking about, which is the right of self-defense. They say Israel has the right of self-defense. They never say that Palestinians also have the right of self-defense, although they are the ones under Israeli military occupation since 57 years, and they are the ones who have been displaced since 76 years. Let me remind you that 70% of the population of Gaza are refugees who were displaced from their towns, the 520 homes, towns, and villages that Israel destroyed in 1948. For the sake of the future, I think we have to talk about, in our conference, we have to talk about 3 stages of intervention to try to help the health system in Gaza. But the first step that we should all demand, and the first goal we should all work for, is to stop the war. Without stopping this genocide, anything we do will just be a little help in comparison to what's needed. Second, I think we need immediately to provide support to mobile medical teams. We need to provide medications to them, medical instruments, aid equipment. We just had one time a possibility of sending some aid equipment to the people who need it. And we need, thirdly, to support the essence of basic life support. People need food, people need clean water, and most importantly, people need sanitary facilities and hygiene. I was shocked when a woman told a team who was interviewing her that she had her period 5 times and she couldn't have a shower once. The fact that the situation of hygiene is so bad now, I ask people, our people, what do you need most? They don't say medications. They say, we need soap. We need cleaning material. We need things to wash our clothes with. All of that is missing in Gaza. And fourth, we need to immediately try to support the reestablishment of permanent health centers wherever it's possible. And fifth, we need to facilitate as much as we can field hospitals to deal with emergencies and to deal with urgent surgical needs, but also to provide support to 60,000 pregnant women who need a safe place to give birth in. And we need to provide support to 1,300 children who had amputations and 3,500 children who have severe malnutrition today, and to more than 20,000 orphans who lost their parents. And most importantly, we need also to find a way to support at least 25,000 injured people who will die if they don't get the proper medical care. The second phase of intervention, everything I said is what should be done immediately. The second phase should be rebuilding the health system. As was said, the health system has collapsed. And what we need is re-establishment of primary health care and diagnostic facilities first. We need to rebuild the secondary hospital care, and we need to rebuild the sanitary infrastructure. You cannot just build hospitals without fixing the sewage systems and the water system and the electricity and the energy supply. And fourth, we need, and that's what I propose, and I propose this to be adopted by all of us. We need to declare that there should be a system of complete, free of charge health insurance system to all the population of Gaza for 3 years to come at least. This is very much needed because people don't have money to pay to anything. Everything is so expensive. You know, even our employees, when they get their salaries, they have to pay 20 to 25% to dealers to get their money, to get their salary, because banking system is not working, and Israel is not allowing money to go to Gaza. This is a very horrible situation at every level. Every day, sometimes at night, I sit down and think, how could our people really survive in such a fantastic and amazing manner, given all these difficulties? And the third stage, which we should all concentrate on, since health is not just about medications and medical care, is to rebuild the shelters for people with proper infrastructural facilities and rebuild the educational system, since Israel has destroyed already all universities and has destroyed most schools, and then to think about tertiary referral for patients who need tertiary care. And another very important point, which I think something has to be done immediately in the first stage, during the second stage, and during the third stage, something we propose is to establish a program of cash for work. That would help many people who are now starving, who have no income whatsoever, but it would help rebuild the economic system in Gaza, without which we cannot speak about healthy life. At the end, there are 3 final points that I would like to alert you to. First of all, the catastrophe is huge. The needs are beyond description. And it is so important that we all coordinate with each other. It is so important to create a network of coordination and cooperation between everybody and all the people who are trying to provide health care or rebuilding the system. We are all needed, and we all have possibilities to do good work, but that requires good coordination. For example, and lack of not to go in the direction of duplication. For instance, Welfare Association is now creating a very good program for orphans. Nobody should try to do the same, or replicate that, or duplicate that. We have to coordinate so that we can get the best outcome of the resources that are used, and since the resources are limited in comparison to the needs that are there. A very good example of what we do in West Bank and in Gaza is the health cluster system, which coordinates the work of different organizations and makes sure that different programs don't compete with each other. I want also to alert you, the problem now is not only in Gaza. The genocide, the collective punishment, and the bombardment is also happening now in the West Bank. We have seen terrible crimes taking place in Tulkarem camp, in Nur Shams camp, in Jenin camp, in Al-Far'a, in Tubas, in Hebron. West Bank is under attack now. And by the way, the same system of infrastructural destruction that Israel is using in Gaza, they are using it in Tulkarem and Jenin. Total destruction. I was there. I went to Jenin myself, and I saw what they have done, not only to the camp, but also to the city. Destroying roads, tens of kilometers of roads, destroying shops, destroying houses, shooting people, using warfare on occupied people. It's unprecedented that you use a whole army and airstrikes on people who are under your occupation. That's exactly what's happening today in Jenin, in Tulkarem, and in many other areas. So Israel is creating another health need for our work, and we had to initiate now, just recently, we had to initiate 6 emergency programs very quickly to deal with the needs that are rising now in Jenin and in Tulkarem and in other places. Second point, it is very important, and I want to really thank three organizations for their good work. UNRWA, which we should all protect, WHO, and OCHA, who have been very responsive to our calls for interventions. And there is a very strong Palestinian civil society in Gaza and in the West Bank and in Palestine in general, and it should be supported. We appreciate very much all the international organizations and foreign groups that try to come and work in Gaza. But please, make sure, for the sake of sustainability, that you work through the grassroots, community-based Palestinian organizations. We don't need you to duplicate or compete with local Palestinian civil society. On the contrary, I think the best outcome can come from cooperation and from good coordination and from doing the work with the local Palestinian civil society. Thanks God we have this civil society, because if we didn't, our situation would be in a much, much worse difficulty. One more thing about UNRWA. Israel aims at destroying UNRWA, and UNRWA is needed, not only because of the important services they are providing, but also because they represent the right of the Palestinian refugees to go home. They represent international legitimacy, which was included in the 194 resolution of the United Nations, which was a condition, the implementation of which was a condition of the recognition of Israel at the time. 212 employees of UNRWA have already been killed, including the last 6 ones just recently. Finally, please understand that when we talk about reconstructing the health system and rehabilitating what was destroyed, and when we speak about meeting the basic needs of the Palestinian population, women, men, children, we are talking about very basic humanitarian need. Nobody should argue about how much this is needed, and nobody should do any obstruction to providing this very important thing. But please understand that at the end of the day, we are struggling to help Palestinians survive and stay in their country. We don't want them to leave. And one of the major goals of our struggle is to prevent ethnic cleansing, which unfortunately was the main goal of this Israeli attack on Gaza, and it is now a major goal of the attacks that are taking place in the West Bank. Staying on the ground, survival, steadfastness is the most important goal so that Palestinians can stay, recover, rebuild their health system, and eventually have what we all want, what we all struggle for, which is freedom and dignity. What we want as Palestinians was very well said by a Palestinian poet by the name of Tawfiq Zayyad, who used to be the mayor of Nazareth. He said, "We, the Palestinian people, are not better than any other people, but no other people is better than us. And what we want is equality and respect of our dignity and our right to be free and healthy." Thank you.
Dr. Mustafa, thank you very much. Our next session is called Words from Palestine. Tech entrepreneur and Palestinian-American storyteller Stephanie Nadi Olsen, will be interviewing former Gaza reporter for Al Jazeera, who now sits at the Doha office, Tamer Mishal. I invite both of them to come to the stage.
Thank you all for being here today. And thank you to Dr. Barghouti and Her Royal Highness Dina for starting us with such powerful and necessary words. Tamer and I are tasked with humanizing the Palestinians that are so often reduced to just numbers. I don't know that we can fully humanize the suffering and destruction that Palestinians have lived through and experienced for the past 76 years in 20 minutes that we have with you today, but we're going to try. My name is Stephanie Nadi Olsen, and I am a Palestinian American. Before we begin, I'm going to share with you briefly the story of my grandparents, Mahmoud and Halima, from Sakia, Palestine. In 1948, in the Nakba that we've heard so much about, my grandparents, along with 750,000 other Palestinians, were violently and forcibly removed from our family farm in Sakia. My grandfather was a farmer growing olives and oranges on a beautiful property there. And my father at the time was 4 years old. And as he shares with me, his earliest childhood memory was leaving his family farm on foot, thinking that he would come back one day, leaving with not even shoes or clothes or birth certificates, and never being able to return. My grandfather took his family eventually to Jordan after going through many refugee camps along the way, and my grandfather's brother took his family to Gaza. Many of the descendants of that line of my family have been killed in Gaza over the last 11 months. My father talks a lot about his earliest childhood memory being seeing his sick mother in a refugee camp or many refugee camps, unable to enjoy her family, unable to care for her 4 young children. My uncle at the time was still a nursing baby, and my grandmother could not get out of bed to care for any of her children. The indignity of the lack of access to medical care in the refugee camps is very pronounced in my family. We don't even know what killed my grandmother, and she died before she was 30 years old. I can't even name what took her life because we don't know. We don't even have a photograph of her. And something so striking that my father has shared when he's feeling brave enough to talk about the trauma that he's experienced throughout his life, particularly as a child in Palestine, is that his family always thought somebody was coming to help. It was unimaginable in 1948 for so many Palestinians to be forced out of their homes, and everybody thought, surely the helpers are going to come. This can't possibly stand. Somebody will come and save us. And as time passed and as their hope began to fade, my grandfather took matters into his own hands. My grandfather, along with several other men from their village, Sakia, got together and left the refugee camps, traveling at night and sleeping during the day to get back to their home, the homes that they owned, that belonged to them, with their belongings and their valuables and their life. They were trying to avoid detection by the occupation forces, and unfortunately, after they made it all the way back to Sakia, they were arrested and jailed by the Israeli forces. My grandfather, Mahmoud, spent over a year in Israeli prison, and my grandmother and her family had no idea if he was even dead or alive. All of this while my grandmother was fighting her own medical battle. As my grandmother was denied access to medical care, it makes me think about all of the people that we're seeing denied access to medical care today and how important it is as part of basic human dignity and basic human rights, as we've heard from previous speakers today. My grandmother deserved to receive the care that she needed. She deserved to participate in the lives of her 4 young children, and she deserved to live longer than her 30 short years. So to see what's happening in Gaza today feels an awful lot like I have a front row seat to the family history that was taken from me and the memories that my family was never able to make together. And I'm able to see something that my father has found too painful to talk about, right? Like, it's been very difficult to get my father to talk about the Nakba and what my family went through because of his own untreated psychological trauma, which is also very much an important part of medical care. While none of us in this room can flip the switch to end this genocide, and I know all of us would if we could, each of us can do something. It's easy to feel helpless and hopeless right now, but each of us has our own unique capacity to help Palestinians right now. And speaking of all the helpers that my grandfather and my father were looking for 76 years ago, we're in a room full of helpers today. And I'm absolutely honored to have one of them here with me, and Tamer Al-Mishal, who is helping in his own unique capacity as a journalist for Al Jazeera. Tamer, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you very much, Stephanie.
I'll read you a quick bio on Tamer, and then we'll start. Tamer is an award-winning Palestinian journalist from Gaza and a senior presenter on Al Jazeera, as well as producing and presenting the investigative program, What is Hidden is Greater. Currently, during the war in Gaza, Tamer has editorial oversight over the Al Jazeera field journalistic crews covering the war in Palestinian and the Palestinian territories. He has also personally field covered the escalations and Israel wars in the Gaza Strip, as well as outside of Gaza. Tamer, thank you for being here today. We're so fortunate to have you here as both a Gazan and a journalist leading a crew of journalists on the ground in Palestine. So thank you. I would love to start with a big question for you. We've had 11 months of this horror. You have an entire team who are tracking it minute by minute. Can you describe what you've seen in terms of the impact of Israel's continued destruction and assault on the medical infrastructure in Gaza?
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Assalamu alaikum. Good morning to everyone here, and really appreciate all of your work, all of your initiatives, all of your support. Thank you for your introduction. And before I'm Al Jazeera reporter, I am a Palestinian human. I am a Palestinian human from a refugee family. My family is from a city called Asqalan, named by the Israeli occupation, Ashkelon. I'm a Palestinian journalist who was born in Gaza. His childhood was during the first Intifada, passing the experience of being tortured and arrested when I was 7 years old, when the Israeli forces invaded my school, primary school, near the beach camp. My academic career, studying journalism in media in the Islamic University of Gaza, it was during the Second Intifada. My first appearance through the TV as a Gaza correspondent for Al Jazeera was the first war in Gaza 2008. From a childhood to my professional career, suffering and suffering, but also determination and determination. And we will not give up. We will continue our great work. And back to your question about the destruction of medical stuff and hospitals. All the documentations, all the great numbers that Dr. Mustafa mentioned, it was seen by everyone outside Gaza due to the great and the brave work by the correspondents, by the reporters, by the Palestinian journalists who are still suffering and struggling under this genocide. 171 Palestinian journalists have been killed in Gaza up to date, in a number which is the highest number in comparison with any war zone in our current history in the last decade. More than 200 of our colleagues, they are suffering from injuries. Some of them in Gaza, we couldn't able to give them the medical treatment. More than 50 of our colleagues, Palestinian journalists, are arrested in the Israeli jails, and around 100 Palestinian media, buildings, and offices also have been destroyed. Examples always telling the truth. Our Gaza correspondent, the one who documented, and by his great work, he documented the invasion and destruction of the main medical complex in Gaza Strip, which is Shifa Hospital. He was Ismail Al-Ghul, our Gaza correspondent. He was the only one staying in Gaza, covering for Al Jazeera. And we are proud in Al Jazeera we have the biggest and only international staff in all of Gaza Strip, covering and covering in the time that most of the international media withdrew their staff outside of Gaza Strip. Ismail was the one who documented a Shifa invasion. He was the one who was broadcasted about the starving, about the crimes against civilians who were trying to go for the trucks of food. He was the one who documented the killing and the crimes against medical staff in Gaza. Ismail last July, with his cameraman, was killed and assassinated by an Israeli drone, killing him. He was 27 years old. This is an example. He paid the price just because he was trying to tell the truth from the ground. And we have another case. Our other correspondent in North Gaza Strip, alhamdulillah, thanks God, he's still alive. And we pray for God to save our colleagues from all the channels inside Gaza Strip to be saved. Anas al-Sharif was covering from the Indonesian hospital in the north of Gaza Strip. Anas, when it was the invasion and the attacks against Indonesian hospital, he received a call from an Israeli intelligence officer. It was recorded, luckily. He said to him, leave the hospital, stop coverage. This is a threat. He refused, and he sent a message from north of Gaza Strip saying, I will not give up. I will continue the coverage. I am from this land, I'm not leaving. Few days later, the Israeli troops hit the house of Anas al-Sharif in Jabalia refugee camp, killing his father. So this is the price of what the journalists are working to document and show you what is the reality on the ground. Therefore, we witnessing all these atrocities and we are witnessing all these crimes. In the time that Israel allowed for some of paramedics and some of medical aids to enter Gaza, for almost 1 year, Israeli troops banned and refused to allow for a single international journalist to get into Gaza. Why? Because they want to kill the truth. They don't want the reality to be out of Gaza. And today, I'm raising up this voice. If you want to see more truth, put a pressure on everyone, on all concerned parties, to allow for international journalists to go and cover from that area. It's shocking that the only war zone in this world, during our current history, there is an occupation forces, doesn't allow for international journalists to get into Gaza. It's just Gaza Strip. Why you are afraid not to allow for international journalists? It's unfair, it's unacceptable to cover what is happening in Gaza internationally from a mainstream news channels from outside of Gaza. This is not a professionalism. This is not a credibility. This is not a balanced coverage. So it's a time to raise up, say, justice for journalism, protect the journalist, to keep up the coverage and to keep up these pictures and tell everyone in the world about reality and about the fact and about what's happening there.
Thank you for highlighting the importance of the role of journalism and ensuring that the truth is out there and that medical care and medical infrastructure can be protected in Gaza. I'm curious from you, as someone who sits in the United States and watches these images across my social media feed and across Al Jazeera every day, it starts to feel unreal. The scale and the suffering and the horror is unimaginable. It's like nothing I've ever seen in my life. Can you describe what is it really like? What are your journalists seeing on the ground, in the hospitals? What does it mean when the hospital is bombed, when it's evacuated, when there's people sleeping in tents outside? Can you tell us more about that?
It's simply, when we say genocide, it's really a genocide. When you are sitting in Doha following up the crews on the ground, on the field, and we have a friend of us, his name is Ahmed Matar. He's a well-respected cameraman. He has been injured with our correspondent, Ismail Abu Omar, in the south of Gaza Strip. Ismail lost his leg, and we managed to get him outside of Gaza Strip. But now for 11 months, we didn't get the approval for a Palestinian cameraman, for our cameraman, Ahmed Matar, who was injured by shrapnels in his head, to get him out of Gaza. When you have these 2.3 million Palestinians, including all of these great journalists, are besieged in a very tiny place. When they are talking about Gaza, Gaza is not a big state. It's a tiny place. It's just 360 kilometers square. From far north to far south, it's just 41 kilometers. From far west to far east, maximum 12 kilometers. So it's very difficult for our journalists. We are not just calling for equipments and for protection for our journalists. Even we need food for our journalists. We need medical treatments. All of our crews on the ground are living in tents. All of their houses have been destroyed. So this is a basic need for a journalist to have his basic needs. But we are really feel proud of these brave people, despite all the difficulties. I will mention you a name of my colleague, Mu'min Lishrafi. He is our correspondent in South Gaza Strip. For 7 months ago, he lost 22 of his family, including mother and father, in destroying his houses in north of Gaza Strip. He lost all of this number of his family. And for 7 months, we couldn't able until now to get their bodies out of the rubbles. They're still under the rubbles. And despite that, he appears every day telling the people of the world about what's happening in Gaza. And before I came here to this great conference, I said to my colleagues in Gaza, I'm going there to talk about your great job. They told me, please, raise up our voice, raise up our message. Please tell them, don't consider us as numbers. Don't count us as numbers. We are not numbers. Everyone has a story, has a hope, has a dream, has a family. This is the message of Palestinian civilians. This is the message of Palestinian journalists. This is a message of a journalist who documented the killing or the arresting before the killing of a well-respected Palestinian doctor, Dr. Iyad al-Rantisi. This journalist told me his story because he was, in the same time, he was arrested and stopped. Dr. Iyad al-Rantisi was moving from north of Gaza Strip to the middle of Gaza Strip with his family, daughters and wife. He was wearing his uniform. He thought that this uniform will be protecting him, but this was the reason to arrest him. He was stopped in the middle of Gaza Strip, where is the checkpoint. They were calling him because he was wearing the green medical uniform. They ordered him to take off his clothes, his uniform, in front of his daughters and wife. 6 days later, we received the first news that he was killed under torture. He is one of more than 40 Palestinian civilians, prisoners, have been killed in Israeli jails. So the story from all sides, it's really shocking. and we are raising up the voice. Don't count us as numbers. Everyone has a story. Everyone has a hope. And we will not give up our coverage because we believe in the end. There is no any occupation. There is no any authority can control the reality, can control the fact, can control our voices. And in the end, justice will win. And the freedom of speech will win. And of course, our people will win.
It's such a poignant message for Palestinians to express their desire not to be viewed as just numbers. Globally, Palestinians, Muslims, people with brown skin have been continuously dehumanized by our media in very insidious ways. And it catches up to us when we allow something like what we've allowed to happen to Palestinians for 76 years. So thank you for sharing the stories and of the heroic stories of the people on your team that are risking their life every day just to show the world what they need to see about Gaza and Palestine. I'm curious about all the people in Gaza who require medical treatment. We've heard the numbers here today. It's incredible the number of people that need medical care, not just for acute conditions that are occurring because of the constant bombardment and damage, but for chronic conditions too. There's still chronically sick people in Gaza that had conditions before this began. What are you all seeing in terms of people that need to get to a hospital for medical care? And we're seeing on the news, right, the ambulances are in danger. There's not enough doctors, there's no medical supplies. What does that look like from the perspective of somebody living in Gaza right now?
Look, as I shared Dr. Mustafa, what he's saying, the first thing, we need this war to stop. We need to protect the people. Talking about reconstructions, talking about all these initiatives is great. But the first move, the first step, this war should be stopped. These massacres should be stopped. We should not normalize with the killing of every moment, of every hour, 100 Palestinians. And you know what has hurt me as a Palestinian journalist? The justifying of killing the journalist. I will come back to our story of our correspondent Ismail Al-Ghul. Ismail was killed. And with his cameraman, after 6 hours of live coverage in the beach camp, he moved with his car, with his cameraman, back to the tent in the Arabic hospital in Gaza City. His car was hit by a missile of a drone. Unfortunately, he was beheaded with his cameraman as a result of the shrapnels of the drone missiles. And we tell everyone his story. 2 days later, Israelis, they justified the killing of Ismail Al-Ghul that he's a terrorist. 3 months before the killing of Ismail Al-Ghul, he was arrested in a Shifa hospital during the coverage with the same cameraman, with the same colleague. He was investigated and being released. If he's a terrorist, why did you release him? So, justifying the killing of the journalists, justifying the killing and arresting the medical teams and paramedics is another crime. Finally, I just will mention the story, and I will not forget, because we are suffering as well as our colleagues, the paramedics and doctors. If you come back to the story of our cameraman, Samer Abu Daqqa, and unfortunately we lost 4 of our colleagues in Gaza during this war among the 171 Palestinian journalists. Samer was left bleeding for 5 hours. We spent 5 hours to coordinate with the Red Cross, with all the concerned party, to send the ambulances to that area to rescue him. When they arrived, they found the 3 paramedics were passed away, and Samer passed away. He tried to take off his flak jackets and helmet because the injury was in his legs. He tried to move and to move and to move, and then the drone hit him again. He is a Belgian nationality. His family is in Belgium. This is the story of Palestinian journalists who are suffering, as well as all paramedics and all civilians. We say today, all these atrocities will not stop us from our commitment for professional standards and getting the voice of Gaza out. The pictures of Gaza out, the reality of Gaza and Palestine is out.
It has been almost a century since my grandmother and my family was denied the dignity of the access to quality health care. And now we're hearing these stories almost a century later that so many Palestinians and Gazans are enduring the same, in fact, worse in many ways. I want to remind everybody in closing that each of us in this room can do something in some capacity to change the course of history and secure access to health care, which is a basic human right for the people of Gaza. I'm so honored to be doing this work and ask that none of you underestimate how much you are needed for this cause right now, and that none of you underestimate how much your single contribution, which will be part of a web of love and helpers from around the world, means to the people of Palestine. So please keep telling our stories, keep learning about Palestine, learn our names, humanize us, and continue doing your work. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Stephanie and Tamer, thank you very much. I think I speak on behalf of all of us when I say to Tamer, I salute you and your colleagues for the important and courageous work that you're doing, without which probably we would not know 5% of what we know about Gaza now. We now have a video message by the UN Senior Humanitarian and Reconstruction Coordinator for Gaza. She was intending to be here, but had to be in New York for other obligations. The video is 5 minutes. Sigrid Kaag.
Colleagues, thank you to the organizing committees of the Gaza Health Initiative and the Koninklijke Instituut voor de Tropen for organizing this conference at this crucial time for Palestinian civilians in Gaza. I very much regret that due to prior commitments, I'm unable to join you in person on this very important topic. If I may recall, the creation of my particular mission would not have been necessary without the horrific terror attacks perpetrated by Hamas in Israel on the 7th of October 2023. As we are approaching the year, we also need to remember the Palestinian people in Gaza who have endured immense suffering, with nearly 41,000 Palestinians killed and countless others injured, severely injured. And for any meaningful scaling up and distribution of assistance, we need a ceasefire. It's often been said. The release unconditionally of all hostages and the return of the remains of those who died in captivity, as well as unimpeded access to and throughout the Gaza Strip. Colleagues, civilians must be protected under international humanitarian law. They have the right to receive humanitarian assistance. In Gaza, at present, nowhere is safe. The conflict has severely impacted health services across the Gaza Strip, the topic of your meeting. Medical evacuations remain severely limited since the closure of the Rafah border crossing on the 7th of May 2024. In late July, the polio virus resurfaced in Gaza, the first time in over 20 years. And against all odds, the health community is currently implementing one of the most complex polio vaccination campaigns globally, made possible through the agreement by the parties to the proposals, including that of humanitarian pauses. And it shows that with the right political will, progress is possible. Last week, I visited several health centers in Gaza, and I want to express my deepest respect and admiration to all health partners that continue to serve the people of Gaza, despite the immense challenges and personal risks they undertake. Colleagues, it's critical to ensure that humanitarian assistance is available at scale, with or without a ceasefire. That requires an enabling environment, effective deconfliction, much discussed, and other primary operational asks of the international community. We've all been vocal about these needs since the start of this conflict. And it's important to remember that we're asking and talking about rights, which need to be translated in actual needs and the response to these needs. And the fact that you're organizing this meeting speaks volumes about your commitment. Your expertise and solidarity are needed to assist the Palestinian civilian population in Gaza to overcome or to start the journey of overcoming this immense trauma over time. Health and public health provisions are central to human dignity and well-being. Yet even without a ceasefire, we need to start thinking and planning for rehabilitation of critical health infrastructure in Gaza. The civilian population cannot be asked to wait. Colleagues from the field, such as Rick Papercorn and others, who will speak later today, will give you a unique inside perspective of their experience and their views. There are, however, as we know, a number of known compelling priorities. To deliver assistance, humanitarian pauses and suspension of evacuation orders are a first step. The polio campaign is a prime-time example of agreements that can be reached and commitments made by all parties. However, we should never have to deal with polio in Gaza in 2024. The UN and humanitarian partners have a 40-day plan to expand health service delivery, prepare, detect, and respond to outbreak-prone communicable diseases, and to strengthen health logistics and prioritization of key health items. And in light of over the 14,000 patients in Gaza in need of urgent treatment outside of the Strip, it's important to restore safe and sustainable medical evacuations from Gaza through all possible routes. We also need patient transfers to Egypt and Jordan and referrals to third countries. Solidarity can be translated in many forms, including support to Egypt to continue the financing of medical support provided to patients, also at scale. I continue to ask European countries to actively offer hosting of patients and their families. It's urgent to rehabilitate health facilities and services to reduce the immediate suffering and lay the groundwork for longer-term recovery. Effective debris management and the clearance of explosive remnants of war are prerequisite for the safe re-establishment of these services. And this example shows how health provisions are intrinsically linked to the restoration of basic services all over Gaza. Mental health and psychosocial support services must be prioritized for a traumatized population. The entire population is traumatized. The Netherlands has been a pioneer in advocating and organizing mental health and psychosocial support services in crisis settings. I sincerely hope that you, as health professionals, continue to press and help organize mental health support services throughout Gaza, using the tools developed, the tools available, as well as innovative methods akin to the situation and the needs of the population. Early recovery and long-term reconstruction will require comprehensive planning and coordination with the Palestinian Authority at its center. Meaningful progress cannot be made without legitimate security and governance arrangements in place. This requires a political horizon towards two-state solution. The position of the UN and the international community is very clear. The Palestinian Authority needs to resume responsibilities in Gaza as soon as possible, and Israel's legitimate security concerns must be addressed. Colleagues, thank you very much for your attention, and above all, your commitment to these very essential issues. Together, we can make a significant difference in addressing the health crisis in Gaza now and looking at the future, and support Palestinian civilians in shaping a more hopeful future with prospects. Thank you.
Our next session is titled Framing the Conversation on Health System, and it will focus on the WHO and World Bank Conflict Recovery Framework. I thank the two speakers in advance for being very mindful of the time because we're running behind on schedule and there's still a lot to be discussed in the breakout sessions amongst others. The first speaker is WHO representative for the occupied Palestinian territories, Rick Papercorn, and he's with us online. Let's check if he's able to hear us and we can hear him. Rick?
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Brilliant. Rick, thanks for joining us. Here's your 10 minutes, and after that, your colleague will speak. If you speak too long, that means you're taking time from him.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to tell. First of all, apologies that I have to talk to you like that. I'm literally just exiting Gaza. So the connection is unstable, so I'll leave my camera out. So, please, I hope that my presentation is on. Let me start this. Sabah al-khair, good morning, goedemorgen to all my Dutch colleagues. Her Excellency, or Her Royal Highness, Princess Dina Miret, Dr. Mustafa Barghouti, Sigrid Kaag, but also let me say colleagues and friends. It's really unfortunate that I'm not able to be here in person and not just to meet all of you, but even to be in my own hometown and meet my family. I'm just now just exiting Gaza, literally, and having been here the last 2.5 weeks. It's my 6th mission since October last year, long-term mission in Gaza. I'll come back to that. This 2.5 weeks, we focused very much on polio, the medevac, but also the regular WHO and humanitarian cluster partners operations. I want to say, first of all, a huge thanks to all of you. And all your organizations representing. And I know there's many of you who are already assisting all the humanitarian work in Gaza, and many of you are planning to do. This is absolutely needed, not just now, when we are still, unfortunately, in this humanitarian phase, but also in future, when we hopefully will shift to this early recovery, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. Mind you, this will be a marathon. It will be more than a decade of work. Can you please show the next slides on the situation in Gaza? So I think most of you know this slide. And if you don't know, please, get to the social media and make sure you receive the WHO situation reports, the weekly reports. The figure speaks for itself. I'm not going to mention them all. But if you look at the number of people killed and under the rubble, but also I want to point out the number of people injured. WHO just yesterday, we released a report on this number of injuries. A quarter of these injuries, so when you look at the 24,000 of that, they will be needing rehabilitation and assistive technology for their life, which is currently not available. Since I'm here, the WHO rep for the occupied Palestinian territory for the last 3.5 years. And normally I came in Gaza every week to work, every month a week to stay with my team there. And since this crisis in October, I've been here 6-7 times for long-term missions. And it is, I think everybody described that. Like all organizations lost staff. WHO, we also lost staff. All staff lost family members. All staff lost friends, families, and neighbors. All staff had to flee and relocate, etc., and be IDPs in their own small Gaza Strip. I want to attract your attention as well to the number of infectious diseases. And you look at not only acute respiratory, the figure on diarrhea. It's now actually almost 600,000 cases, and those figures are an underestimation. This is 25 times what is normally. Look also at acute jaundice syndrome. It's all syndromic management, it's all hepatitis A. It just shows you the horrific water and sanitation conditions. And that brings me, of course, that I'll talk later a little bit more about this confirmed CVDPP case and detection of polio. The hospital functionalities, and I think it's been raised by the former speakers, the health service has been decimated. We have less than half of the hospitals which are partly functional. a third of the primary healthcare centers, and 9 out of the 10 field hospitals. I want to stress one point, and I think it was also raised by Dr. Barghouti. The incredible resilience of the health workers and partners like WHO, other UN partners, and many, many of you. Because I've seen myself how hospitals got destroyed and damaged. WHO have been getting out the last patients and staff from those hospitals on all those missions. In February, the National Medical Complex was part of those missions where we got out the last staff, 150 staff, and patients, 150 patients, and I think 40 staff. Shifa the same. Currently, though, National Medical Complex is operational again with support of all those partners, but due to the resilience. The same Shifa, I was just there a couple of days ago, partly operational again, and all the hospitals, other hospitals in the north, Al-Ahli, Kamalawan, Al-Abda, but patient-friendly, Indonesian hospital, all of them at one stage, they were partially functional, minimal functional, or non-functional, and they are again partly functional. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, can I get the next slide? WHO, we are mandated also to report, monitor, analyze, and report on the attacks of healthcare. I will not go into details. You can see the horrific figures, but I think I just want to point out also the 128 health workers which remain detained and arrested. Medevac. Up till now, roughly 5,000, a little more than 5,000 patients have been evacuated. But since the Rafah border, the crossing closed, and WHO has been assisting with all of that processes. Since the Rafah crossing closed on the 6th of May, there's been hardly any medevac. 2 large medevac organized by WHO and actually to the UAE. Really big thanks to the United Arab Emirates for that. Just 2 days ago, we actually managed to bring out 252 people, of which 100 patients. 143 were children. The day before, I went with a mission to the north of Gaza, Shifa, to bring fuel for polio, to assist with the polio campaign analysis, but mostly important as well, to get the last 8 patients out we could get on this mission, 8 patients and their 12 companions. We estimate that there's more than 10,000 Gazans, patients, critical patients, half of them related to the war, half of them chronic patients which need to be medevac outside Gaza. And WHO is consistently requesting for a more organized medevac and for medical corridors. We need to restore the traditional referral pathway to East Jerusalem and the West Bank. We need to get a medical corridor to Egypt and hopefully one to Jordan as well. And then from there to other countries. The operational constraints and challenges working in Gaza, having been working from the start, they remain the same. And that is a sad thing, unlike the polio bubble, which I will talk about later. So the insecurity, the coordination, the lack of a workable deconfliction mechanism, the fuel, the shortage of supplies, the displacement of the medical and humanitarian personnel, attacks on health. Next slide, please. So what has been done from the start? And I'm proud of what WHO actually, the way we started. We've been super operational from the start. And I will not go into details, but you can already see the almost 200 missions which we started, participated. It was all the same. In the beginning, it was all about medical supplies and fuel. WHO was the first one who actually brought supplies to Shifa, but then to other hospitals in the north. It's also, which is not normally our task, to medevac internally patients, which we did many times from the north to the south and to other places. Later, from late December, deploy the emergency medical teams and to assist them, and of course, constantly to do assessments. We supporting nutrition and malnutrition stabilization together with all the partners. I want to mention UNRWA, UNICEF. There's so many, but also, and Dr. Barghouti is completely right, the many national NGOs, PMRS, PRCS, and you name them, I mean, many, many are. They're all partners of it, and we consequently work. We cannot do proper medevac when PRCS is not operational, or CADUS is not operational, etc. The coordination of the cluster partner, I think Dr. Bakuti referred to, extremely important that we keep this going. Next slide, please. So this is something what the cluster partners, and if you only see the consultations from the emergency medical teams, over 1.4 million, the primary healthcare, children immunized, post and postnatal consultations, the NCD management, critically important. We completely forget about the chronic diseases. Mental health and psychosocial support, I think rightly so, I think emphasized by Sigrid Kaag. And we will need a complete new approach for mental health and psychosocial support, not only for the children and special needs group, adolescents, women, men, elderly, health workers, I would specifically also mention, and all the frontline workers, but also the humanitarian workers. I've seen too many deeply, deeply affected. Next slide, please. I'll take you quickly through something on polio. So on 16 July, the global polio lab network notified the 6 circulated variant poliovirus isolates. The genomic sequencing linked this to an outbreak of CVDPV in Egypt. And based on this analysis, etc., this variant could have been introduced in Gaza as early as September. Next slide, please. So 5 cases of AFP, with assistance of WHO, we started strengthening the surveillance, which of course had collapsed, just like the routine immunization program had suffered tremendously, to Jordan, and unfortunately a 10-month-old unvaccinated child from Deir al-Balah. Gaza is confirmed to have polio. I want to stress, before this crisis, Gaza, just like West Bank, had a very good routine immunization with coverages as high as 90 to 95%, actually better than a lot of high-income countries. But based on the risk assessments, the Ministry of Health and WHO and partners, the risk of spread within Gaza and international neighboring countries, it was, and also the incredibly poor water and sanitation conditions, etc., completely necessary to start the campaign. Next slide. So together with a wide range of partners, the Ministry of Health, WHO, UNICEF, UNRWA, and I want to stress many, many of the partners, too many to mention, we are implementing a 2-round polio. The first round has just been completed. And we did that in 3 zones and over 3 phases. We started in central Gaza, we moved to the south, and then to the north. We negotiated this so-called humanitarian area-specific pauses, absolutely necessary, because otherwise we would never have been able to achieve what we have achieved. So actually the figure, what you see is even wrong, but at the moment, the figure we have now, that 558,963 children have been vaccinated. It's an incredible achievement. The post-campaign monitoring has actually started already now, and will continue till next Thursday. We also, of course, strengthen the surveillance. It's more samples. Said environment. Actually, currently, I take environmental samples with me, and further AFP and the strengthening of routine immunization. Next slide, please. So here you see the overview of that, and also not getting into the details. I've been working for 7.5 years as a rep in Afghanistan, and we did multiple polio campaigns there, 10s a year. It's the only Afghanistan and Pakistan, the only 2 countries where you still have wild polio virus. When we see these outbreaks of this vaccine-derived polio virus, we always see this in areas of war and strife, where children get under-vaccinated or unvaccinated, and that happened here as well. You see the incredible complexities on that. We do based on the post-campaign monitoring, we will have a better overview of the actual coverage and the target population. Next slide, please. I have to say something brief on the West Bank, was raised by Dr. Barghouti as well. Extremely concerned about the events. These are some of the figures since October last year. And the latest escalations, the siege of the Jenin hospitals, Tulkarem, Nablus, etc., speak for themselves. Next slide. The response to West Bank, of course, is much smaller. A little bit the same pattern. Is as much as possible preposition of supplies, stockpiling essential supplies together with partners, mapping the inputs, procurement of the high priority medication, and technical assistance in a number of variety of areas. Next slide, please. This is my last two slides, because I think you gave the sign that I have to finish. So what about a way forward? And a way forward should be focused on the occupied Palestinian territory, with a focus, of course, on Gaza, but we should not forget the West Bank. So the first three pillars, WHO, when we started this, and we had an operational response plan ready from October till March, and including a report, which you can all find on our website, we focused on the humanitarian health response, the delivery of essential health services, the referral pathway, primary care, restoring trauma care, emergency medical teams, etc. The second pillar is, of course, very complex, the public health intelligence, early warning, prevention, and control. Where most of the funds and investments are in is in the supplies and logistics. And we all know the complexities from Al Arish and Egypt, and currently everything through Kerem Shalom. I will not get into details, but it has been a nightmare. I've worked in many conflict countries. I've never observed that. Coordination, critically important. We have a functional health cluster in Palestine, both in Gaza and the West Bank. And I completely agree with Dr. Barghouti. This is how we have to work, also in future. The last pillar is a new pillar in our operational plan till the end of the year. And I think you're going to focus a lot on this today. It's, of course, in the area of early recovery, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. Brings me to the last slide. So together with the governments, but also with the World Bank, UN, and the EU, quite a bit of work has been done already, and my World Bank colleague will expand on that. Interim damage assessment completed in February, which gave already the start figures, which is a complete underestimate. I want to mention that. There is currently work on the Gaza relief and early recovery plan, and also then focusing on the sector. We do this, of course, as a one UN, and we will focus on each and every sector. In health, led by the Ministry of Health together with WHO and the World Bank, my colleague from the World Bank will expand on this. There's two last points I want to make. So having been and worked my former job 7.5 years in Afghanistan as a rep, spending more than 20 years in Central and Southern Africa, went through the whole HIV/AIDS epidemic. I saw the refugees coming from Rwanda over Lake Tanganyika, setting up camps, etc. I must say I've never seen something like what I've witnessed over the last 11 months, personally as well, in Gaza. And sometimes, specifically in the first couple of months, but even up till now, it was if you were in a World War I movie. And you had discussions with colleague surgeons, etc., which said we need a vascular surgeon, we need to do amputations now. And they had to make this kind of choices. We have to do an amputation because we don't have a vascular surgeon. Incredible scenes, I think, all over. And my last point to all of you is we need to absolutely continue. We should not forget there's still a war going on. And we need to continue and substantially expand the ongoing humanitarian health response. We will need to do this for years to come. In the meantime, we have to see, and it's already happening in small scale, how we can phase in early recovery, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. And I'm afraid we will need to continue, and we will need this solidarity for at least a decade, if not longer, to come. Finally, of course, for all of this, what would be the best is a ceasefire and a peace process, which will be required actually to really make substantial progress. Thank you very much. Apologies that I I have to communicate like this. I wish I was always be with you, and I wish you all the success in this conference for today. I'm sure I will meet many of you. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Rick. Our next speaker is a health economist at the World Bank who will focus on the WHO and World Bank conflict recovery framework, which shall serve as a useful framework for the discussions we have throughout the day. I also thank him for the generosity of promising to respect the time limit. Please give a warm welcome to Ramin Zivari.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. It's indeed great to be here among you all today. And I think the current situational update has been perfectly covered by all esteemed speakers and colleagues who came before me. So, but one thing in common that I think we all heard is that the recovery and reconstruction cannot necessarily wait until the conflict is over, as much as it's extremely the primary criteria for it. We need to do a lot of preparation and preparatory work to be able to move fast once we do have that opportunity. So as part of that preparation, we at the World Bank, in close collaboration with our UN colleagues and also Palestinian leadership, we are trying to develop sectoral conflict recovery frameworks. And today I'm going to be presenting very quickly what we have for the health sector. And again, I want to reiterate that this draft in progress, and even once it's completed, it's going to be a working document that will keep getting updated as the situation evolves, and depending on the resource availability, and also, of course, feedback and comments from all colleagues and stakeholders who are working in the ground and beyond to support recovery of health sector in Gaza. If you can go to the next slide, please. So I'm just going to quickly just touch point on why do we actually need this framework, and then of course overall some of the key principles that we are thinking and interventions for it, and then challenges that we do expect to face when we go to the recovery, and also the next step for this work. So it goes without saying that in context after context that most of us have seen and worked, and of course all conflicts are very different. The suffering is different, not to do any comparison, but as soon as the conflict is over, the more delay happen in the preparation and of planning of what to do and how prioritization should work, the prolonger the suffering of people gets. And also, mostly we have seen that once the conflict is over, usually there is a surge of resources in terms of like donor aid and also bilateral government contributions and all of those. So if the right planning is not in place and the capacity is not in place, usually there's a lot of wastages of resources and duplication in the efforts that happen. So based on that, we are trying to do this work, and if we can go to the next slide, we do hope that this recovery framework is going to actually serve as a nexus for connecting the humanitarian work is currently happening, and then the recovery phase early, and then later on recovery phases, and also the sustainable development as we move forward. Just one point, if you can go back to the slide, sorry. Just one point I do want to reiterate, that a lot of the work for the development of this is going to come from assessment, which is happening in parallel, which is called rapid damage and need assessment. Again, by the bank, the UN colleagues, and also the Palestinian leadership, just to look at and quantify the damages in terms of like both financial and then human resources lost, especially health workers and infrastructure, because that's going to be the primary, basically informing document. But then beyond that, all other work and assessments which are happening will be serving to finalize this. And if you can move to the next slide, please. Here we have, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because it has been said by colleagues and speakers. The primary goal is basically for all of us to try to restore health services for whole Gaza population, and make sure that it doesn't come with financial hardship. And then we do have some guiding principles that have been again mentioned by our colleagues in terms of how it needs to happen under Palestinian leadership. and in terms of effective donor coordination, safety of the health workers, and etc. If we can move to the next slide. Here are the 4 main focus areas that we are trying to focus, and I believe that Dr. Mustafa has beautifully covered it in his speech as well. The ultimate priority is going to be, of course, restoring the service delivery, because we do see that it's not just about the injured population in the ground, but also a lot of Palestinians and Gazans who have actually had a lot of non-communicable disease in the ground, and they have not been receiving the necessary health services that they need, children and mothers who are suffering. So this restoration of the service delivery is going to be, of course, the key, but then to do that, making sure that the right health resources in place, because although we haven't actually have any specific and accurate number, but the preliminary, basically anecdotal reporting shows that there has been quite a lot of losses in the health workers, and we need to quantify it accurately and be able to actually work together to make sure that that's restored and retained. And also the infrastructure is not going to be easy one, because of course, not just because it's expensive, but also it takes a lot of time. So that's going to be key, and we need to be very sure in terms of our planning on how that's going to happen, what's going to be the phase based on the resources. And then the last but not least, of course, the governance structure, how it's going to look in terms of the health sector, but also the immense amount of financing that needs to come. And as Rick mentioned, our initial interim damage assessment that the bank and the UN did it and finalized it in February, which was extreme underestimate, showed that only the infrastructure and equipment damage was above $500 million, and which of course has certainly increased a lot since then. And so that's going to be extremely critical to make sure that the required financing is in place. If you can go to the next slide, which I believe is basically more or less the most important one. Here, the way also Dr. Mustafa mentioned, that we will need to actually look into in terms of like specific phases, what we can do for each of these 4 focus areas that I mentioned, in terms of the first 100 years or 100 days or early recovery phase, and then moving to the short to medium-term recovery, and then long-term in terms of building the resilience and sustainable development of the health sector. I'm not going to go into all of these because it's going to take certainly a lot of time, but just to quickly point out that for each of it, the way we are thinking, for example, on the maintaining essential health services, of course, restoration of critical trauma care and also essential health services in terms of mother and children and woman care is going to be extremely critical. But then, of course, as we move further, it's going to be important to also make sure that the foregone care for the non-communicable disease patients, such as diabetics, those with cardiovascular diseases, with kidney patients, all of those receive that. And then, of course, in the longer run, it is going to be critical to avoid the same problem we had even before the conflict, that there was a lot of dependency on outside medical referrals, not only in terms of the cost was extremely difficult, but also in what we are seeing right now in the West Bank as well, unfortunately, that it's actually eating a lot of the health sector budget, which is really not sustainable. So making sure that the services which needs to actually cover all the need, even if it's complex and advanced, is in place. And in terms of infrastructure, which is, again, I would want to reiterate, it's going to be the most difficult one, probably. The way we are thinking is, of course, at the initial phase, it's going to be extremely important to make sure that quick wins can be gained in terms of like some of the facilities that could be repaired, in terms of like minor renovation work should be prioritized, and of course the PHC facilities, which is going to be the backbone of the health sector, and then how to connect that with already temporary facilities which have been put in place, mobile health centers and all of those, to be able to make sure that they function effectively. But then, of course, as we move ahead with the short to medium term next phase, to see how we can all work together to make sure that the reconstruction of the hospitals, especially the ICU units, which are going to be extremely critical, especially from our experience of COVID, that we don't necessarily need to just build the entire hospital at the same time and just wait for it for a few years to finish, but also maybe focus on the critical wards, which are going to be extremely important for providing services for their acute conditions. And also, but of course, moving forward, it's going to be important to make sure how the infrastructure is rebuilt for all facilities, and that is going to require some critical feasibility assessment of what is the actual need. Because prior to the conflict, if we look at the situation, we did have quite a few hospitals, and which some of them were actually by generous donations of the bilateral governments. But sometimes we have seen that when reconstruction is happening, it shouldn't be just based on what's the priority for the government, which is actually putting the money in. It should be based on what's the actual disease burden in the ground and how the geographical distribution of it happens based on different criteria to make sure that it's actually useful. And then on the human resources, the way we are thinking, hopefully that in the next early recovery phase, we are going to be able to again count on the heroic work that the health workers are doing in the ground, but of course making sure that they do have the right incentive and compensation to be able to do that. As I've heard from colleagues that has been extremely difficult to provide until now. And then of course there are a specific mechanism of trying to do, even if required, which they already are doing at even humanitarian stage right now, if it requires double shifting. But I think one thing which is going to be critical is how to leverage from the presence of the international medical experts on the ground, just to make sure that expertise is transferred to the local capacity. But of course, as we move forward, it's going to be extremely important to ramp up again the training of the health workers. If it's, that will require close work with the Ministry of Higher Education and also like work with the higher education sectors to make sure that that happens. And then of course, moving ahead, making sure how do we retain it, because that retainment has always been difficult, not just at Gaza, but also West Bank level because of different factors right now that we are seeing. They are not, the salaries are not really paid. They have to work like 2 days per week, which becomes extremely difficult and tricky. And then of course, last but not least, the financing and governance. At least at the early phase of recovery, what we are envisioning is that there's going to be a lot of need to depend on donor international aid to be able to achieve this. Because again, as we know that the economic situation is extremely dire, there is no public basically funding available. 80% of the economic, at least the bank figures, World Bank figures shows that at least there has been quite a lot of sort of like downturn when it comes to economic activity, which for the reasons we all already know. But then moving forward, of course, there's going to be extreme need to make sure that the right unified and an umbrella approach is put in place. That could be, of course, in different scenarios that we are thinking. One is going to be, of course, having a united Palestinian fund where all the donors and everyone who's trying to contribute the money come through it, and then of course make sure that how it's utilized for a unified program rather than specific small scale projects, which usually unfortunately a lot of waste in resources, especially when it comes to management of it. And then again, making sure that that sustainable mechanism, that financing mechanism is sustainable and not go back to the same problems we have had, again, even prior to the conflict in terms of outside medical referrals, a lot of money costing, especially when patients have to go to the private sector, and how to make sure that the strategic purchasing mechanisms are thought through even from the very beginning when the system is we are trying to recover the system. And then if we go to the next slide, just some quick consideration that has already been mentioned, so I'm not going to go into detail of it, but there are going to be few specific criteria that without it, recovery is not going to be possible. Of course, peace being on the top of it, but then moving forward, uninterrupted movement of both goods and personnel, in terms of like if the doctor's medical expertise cannot go in, or if we are talking about like sometimes we are seeing that antibiotics can enter Gaza. In such a scenario, if that continues, which was a big problem even prior to the conflict, when we talk about massive reconstruction of facilities, that's just going to remain a wishful thinking rather than an actual pragmatic move ahead. And then, of course, to make sure that how the local capacity exists in terms of managing the funding, managing the process, and the recovery phase itself. And then, of course, making sure that the sustainable financing is in place, and also safety of health workers. And if we just quickly go to my final slide, in terms of next step when it comes to the conflict recovery framework itself, we are going to continue to work very closely with all our partners, stakeholders, especially under the leadership of the Palestinian leadership, to make sure that we have a draft ready and completed and finalized. And then if you go to the last slide, sorry. And then, of course, at the same time, we're going to try to complete the rapid damage and need assessment, just to make sure that we do have accurate quantification of the situation in the ground. And then, of course, this recovery framework will work together with other sectoral frameworks just to make sure that they're all aligned. And just a quick example of it, if I may say, for example, for nutrition, we are seeing that acute nutrition is going to be, of course, responsibility of the health sector. But if you want to actually make sure that the food security is in place, proper targeting of the right individuals are in place, you will need to work with social protection, agriculture sectors, and beyond, or either including the hygiene and sanitation, which is going to be work of broader than the health sector, as Dr. Mustafa rightly mentioned. So that's going to be key. And I think I will stop here. Thank you very much, and I hope I helped you.
Thank you very much, Ramin and Rick, for this overview. Our last session before we have the breakout workshops is a video produced by Kit and partners on the ground, and it's titled Voices from Gaza. Here it is.
I think we saw it in the newspaper. Really, it doesn't reflect the truth in Gaza or in the hospital.
There is no safe place in Gaza.
The first thing that
Slim is, als ik zeg tegen de moderators, ze gaan nu allemaal weglopen, hoe laat ze moeten stoppen met hun breakout.
I think we saw it in the newspaper. Really, it doesn't reflect the truth in Gaza or in the hospital.
There is no safe place in Gaza.
the first thing that needs to be done is ceasefire. Having all these ongoing attacks stops us from repairing and rebuilding the damaged hospitals. These huge projects need a lot of funding and a lot of cooperation on the international level, not only on a national level. And also these sectors, they lack the infrastructure. So they don't have sewage system, they don't have clean water, they don't have electricity. So for us to start building, we need to first have the infrastructure in place.
There's no drinking water in Gaza, so they don't have shampoo, they don't have soap to clean their hand, anything to clean their bodies. It's not available at all.
We're not looking for luxury healthcare services, we're looking for the basic need for living.
I heard about shortage, medicines and medical supplies, but I never imagined that I go to warehouse and see empty shelves. Wherever you look, you don't see nothing there at all.
They have no milk or meal, especially for the neonate kids. I remember what happened with me once. One of the mothers, she carrying a little boy and she's crying. She told me like, I'm searching for one bottle of milk for over 1 week.
There's no open corridor for the entry of any aid. So we need to have official entry points, easy access for the entry of everything. First, medical aid, medical supplies, medication, food, hygiene supplies, so that they can have basic life with the humans in Gaza.
The generator stopped a lot of time during surgery. We start using our phone to complete the surgery, and that happened a lot of time. So there is no electricity. We are in the middle of the operation. We have to use our phones to finish the surgery.
I found very loyal staff, loyal to their people, to their profession, to the oath that they made. I saw medical doctors moving their families to live inside the hospital in order to work 24/7 inside the hospital. So on the other side, I saw people that not only need the help, but deserve it. And with the help, they can do a lot of things. Sometimes the manpower is an issue, but for Gazan people, with the shortage of staff, they still are able to manage it and cover this shortage by dedication and by working extra hours to compensate any lack or shortage of manpower.
And they want to go back to Gaza, like those who are in Jordan or in Egypt. They want to go back to their country to rebuild the sector there.
Hopefully all of us will keep pushing till we see Gazan people have an access to medical health system, able to cure their injuries and heal their bodies and souls. Because in medical sector, we are not deal only with the physical injuries, but also we heal the souls of people.
Another heart-shattering testimony. We now have 2 rounds of breakout sessions. One is before lunch and the second one is after lunch. They are organized according to the WHO health system building blocks, and the first 3 workshops, so before lunch, will consider the emergency phase, and then the second round will be about recovery and reconstruction of the health system. If you have not picked a workshop yet, you are free to pick the one that you like. The workshops, as well as the locations where they are held, are all in your program booklet. If you have lost your program booklet, please pick up another one at the registration desk, and there are people around to help you find your way. After the breakout sessions, we reconvene here in the plenary room for some concluding sessions. Now, in the interest of time, because there was so much to be discussed, I kindly ask that you don't take a real coffee break, but a transition coffee break. That is, grab a cup of coffee and head to the workshop as soon as possible because we're running behind. Thank you very much so far.